on this card, including the main event between Alistair Overeem and Alexei Olenek. You can check out part 1 of this video in the description below. I'll leave a link to it there. And also, don't forget that we are now on iTunes. So please go pick up your iPhone, go to the podcast app, search for The Moneycast and subscribe and leave me a rating and review there. I would really appreciate it. So remember also, this weekend at UFC on ESPN Plus 7 on Saturday, a few hours before the event takes place, I will be doing a live stream video if every single video that I put out this week gets 150 likes. So we've already almost hit that target on part 1 of this video. So if you want that live stream to come, please hit the thumbs up button below, and in that live stream I will be trying to find a decent value prop bet for every single one of these fights taking place this weekend, and I will also be answering all your questions in the live chat about anything to do with betting, anything to do about the UFC, anything to do about MMA or life in general. So don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you want that. But let's jump right into the first fight that I want to talk about today, which is going to be Islam Makhachev against Arman Tsarukyan. Now, I hope I am pronouncing that correctly. There are some challenging surnames on this card, but hopefully that's close. I did try. So Arman Tsarukyan is stepping up to make his UFC debut against a tough opponent in Islam Makhachev. And at just 22 years old, that is a very, very tricky task indeed. Remember that a massive percentage of fighters actually lose when they make their UFC debut. So the UFC throwing a young 22-year-old guy into a co-main event spot against a popular Russian fighter like Makhachev is a very big ask. But Tsarukyan's not bad, to be honest with you. He trains at Tiger Muay Thai. He's reasonably good everywhere. He doesn't blow my hair back in any particular department. He's not amazing in any particular department, but I would say that he is above average at everything. So, rather than jumping about all over the place when we talk about this fight, let's just jump into showing you some footage of Tsarukyan so that you can familiarize yourself with what he brings to the table. So this first fight that I'm going to show you is from back in August against Felipe Oliveri. And it was a fight that Tsarukyan won. In fact, he actually dominated. I'm not going to show it all to you here, but this fight is a very good illustration of what to expect from Tsarukyan. So I do really apologize if you are listening to this on iTunes. The breakdown for this fight is going to be quite dependent on the footage I'm going to show you. So it won't be very good to listen to. But hopefully the rest of the video, the next 2 fights I'll be covering won't be so bad. So we're going to jump right into this now. Tsarukyan's last fight against Felipe Oliveri. And what you will notice about Tsarukyan is that he pretty much fights with the same game plan, the same strategy in every single one of his matchups. His striking isn't anything special, to be honest with you. He's got very nice combos. You see a very nice 2-punch combo leading into a head kick there. And a spinning attack there. But what you'll notice about Tsarukyan is that his striking's very average. His striking doesn't blow your hair back. It's very predictable. You see he throws a lot of telegraph spinning attacks there. If we can go back just a few moments here, we can see him turn his hips to threaten the spinning attack. But Oliveri read it and managed to just scoot back outside the range, and then eventually he does throw the spinning back fist. But it was very, very telegraphed, very predictable. Not easy to land those kind of techniques on UFC level fighters. But this is what Tsarukyan wants. He's not a striker. He's not a kickboxer. He's a grappler, and his striking only serves to get his opponents thinking about his hands and his kicks so that he can look for openings to take them down. And very early on into this fight, just a minute in, he shoots a very nice deep double leg takedown that he doesn't get, but he does manage to get 2 underhooks in and a full body lock around his opponent that you can then turn into a takedown. Very, very nice. And Tsarukyan then spends the remainder of the round in top position, chipping away at Oliveri. So then we go to the second round. I believe we're into the second round. No, these are just replays. So here we go into the second round, and again, Tsarukyan striking, nothing special, very average, just focusing on defense, chipping away at his opponent, and then very early on, just 15 seconds into this round, shoots a deep double leg takedown and puts Olivieri on his back. Again, decent period of top control before they're back to their feet. You can guess what happens here. Again, keeping the fight in kickboxing range, focusing on defense. Nothing special, some spinning attacks, but everything is to get this fight to the ground. Every single attack or every single piece of striking is to try and set up his takedowns. Tsarukyan wants his opponents on the ground. And then in the third round, when Tsarukyan's got Olivieri thinking about his hands, he actually lands a devastating knockout, which I will show you here. This is into the third round, as we can see again. You know, some exchanges in kickboxing range, and it doesn't take long. You know, we're only 50 seconds into the third round when Tsarukyan shoots another really deep double leg attempt that the ring actually complicates here. If that was a cage, Olivieri would have done a good job of getting his back against the cage. He could have then used the cage to defend it, but obviously Tsarukyan drove him straight through the ropes. But if I just skip ahead a few seconds, when the referee restarts the action, we can see that Tsarukyan does land the kill shot any second now with a very, very nice head kick KO. There it is, absolutely dead. But to be honest with you, from what I've seen, if we look at Tsarukyan's record, you go back through his record, he's got a lot of wins by decision, a lot of wins by submission. Not that many wins by knockout. Obviously, you can see quite a few here, but it was very early on in his career when he was fighting, you know, really low-level guys or guys making their pro debuts. But as he started to face a tougher level of opponent here, you can see most of his wins coming by decision and submission, which just speaks to the fact that even though that was a devastating head kick KO win over Olivieri, he's not particularly dangerous standing, very, very average standing. And you'll see that more in the next fight that I want to show you from him, which is his matchup against Junior Asuncao, which took place back in May last year, so almost around about a year, just short of a year. So if we hit play on this, you can see that this is quite deep into the first round, to be honest with you. But just like in the last fight, you can see Tsarukyan showing some really predictable, some really telegraphed, some really sloppy spinning attacks, which can get you into a lot of trouble in the UFC. You know, there you see him throw a really scrappy, lazy, sloppy overhand right, a really predictable, sloppy spinning back fist that came nowhere near landing. And these are the kind of attacks that can get you into a lot. There you see another really awkward spinning attack. And a lot of the time, when fighters throw these spinning attacks, it's because they're not comfortable exchanging. They don't have the technique to stand in front of their opponent and fight using the correct technique. And there you can see, doesn't take long before Tsarukyan jumps in on another very, very deep double leg takedown and actually gets reversed here and mounted, which was not good for him at all. This was right at the end of the first round. He actually ended the round mounted. But before that, I was just saying that when you see fighters throw spinning attacks like that, really sloppy, really telegraphed spinning attacks where you can see when their hips are starting to move, that's often a sign that a fighter's quite inexperienced or quite nervous in striking range. They don't really know what to do, so they just do stupid shit. Basically, that puts themselves in a lot of danger, because spinning attacks like that, you know, give your back up to your opponent. It enables them to get a tight body lock on you and tie you up and potentially take you down. It also opens you up to counters. It's just generally not a good idea. It's different if you've got sharp technical technique like Edson Barboza with no wind up, you know, no predictable signs you're about to throw a spinning attack, and if you're lightning fast like Barboza. But Tsarukyan, very, very predictable with his spinning attacks, and it just goes to show that he's quite an inexperienced striker. So if we go a bit further on into the fight, we will go quite a bit further on actually, because I don't want to show you Tsarukyan from top position. We know he's got a strong top game. We don't want this video to end up being really, really long. But this is the start of the second round. And again, you can see just some very serviceable striking from Tsarukyan. Nothing special. Just happy to fight in kickboxing range. Focus on defense. And really just his striking is just a means to an end. He's just looking at it from an opportunity. He's just looking for an opportunity to basically set up his takedowns. Striking, nothing special, doesn't blow your hair back. Another lazy spinning attack, but that's really unlikely to be effective against a guy like Islam Makhachev. So I could just leave this fight running in the background while I talk about, how I feel about this fight from a betting perspective. So I do think this is a tough matchup for Tsarukyan. He's definitely decent. He's definitely going to cause a lot of guys in the UFC a problem. He's clearly a strong wrestler there. We can see a very nice deep double leg takedown there. Drove through, lots of power, lots of explosiveness, straight into side control, which is very nice. But his striking is very average. Doesn't really carry that much power in his hands. Doesn't really carry that much power in his kicks, and his spinning attacks just aren't really dangerous at all. And we know that Islam Makhachev is making big improvements with striking in every fight. He's got decent footwork, good head movement, a decent chin, legit KO power in every strike. It's unlikely that Tsarukyan will cause Makhachev a problem if the fight stays standing. And obviously on the ground, even though Tsarukyan is clearly a strong grappler, we know that Islam Makhachev trains at American Kickboxing Academy with Khabib Nurmagomedov. He's also a very high-level grappler himself. And this is a massive step up in competition for Tsarukyan. A massive challenge for a young 22-year-old fighter, like I say, to make their UFC debut against a popular Russian in the co-main event of a big Russian event. Remember that Tsarukyan isn't Russian. He is Armenian, I believe. I believe this is the Armenian flag, which means he doesn't have home advantage. The crowd will be behind Makhachev, which puts Tsarukyan at a significant disadvantage. Another thing that I think is potentially going to make this a tricky fight for Tsarukyan is the fact that I feel he may be quite small for the division. If we just rewind to when the fight is in striking range, back to here, you can see that he is quite small. And you can see just compared to his opponent, compared to Junior Assunção, he does look quite small. And at 5'8" and only 22 years old, your body's still developing, your body's still growing at that age, still getting bigger, still bulking up. He hasn't developed that grown man strength yet. Whereas Makhachev is 5'10", and at 27 years old, he'll just be a much more physically imposing fighter. And with both these guys primarily being grapplers, if this fight does go to the ground, they're both obviously technically very good, but Makhachev's physicality could give him a big advantage over Tsarukyan. So if we look at this fight from a betting perspective, we will close that down. So Makhachev, his odds have actually improved quite a bit since the beginning of the week. So on Monday, he was around about a 1.20 favourite, which is minus 500, I believe. And his odds have now improved up to around about 1.30. So that would be minus 333, giving Makhachev an implied probability of 77%. Now, in order to bet anyone at these odds, like I always say, they pretty much have to have no way to lose. So to bet Makhachev here, you'd have to give him, an 82 to 83% or better chance of winning, which is obviously a stretch in the UFC when we take into account bad weight cuts, injuries, sicknesses during fight week, disruptions to training camp, stress and anxiety, flash KOs, disqualifications. It's tough to cap any fighter at having an implied probability. It's tough to cap any fighter having that good of a chance of winning, to be honest with you. But then if we look at the odds on Tsarukyan, at the moment, call is odds on average are around about 3.85, which is plus 285, giving him an implied probability of 26%. I'm not rushing out to bet him, to be honest with you, because like I say, he's not really going to cause Makhachev a problem striking. I give Makhachev the advantage there. On the ground, he's clearly very, very skilled, but Makhachev training with Khabib every day, he's got a size advantage, a physicality advantage. It's a massive step up in competition for Tsarukyan. You'd have to give the advantage to Makhachev on the ground as well. And Tsarukyan's not particularly dangerous standing. I know he landed the kill shot on Olivieri, but aside from that, I wasn't really that impressed by his striking, to be honest with you. So this is one of those fights where, even though there might be a little bit of value on Tsarukyan, I guess, if you bet him, you're not putting your money in a strong position because Makhachev's simply better everywhere. He's got home advantage and he's the bigger man. So I would recommend passing on this fight, guys. Definitely don't bet Makhachev as a big favourite. There's no value there. But also, I don't think Tsarukyan's a very good bet either. So then if we move on to the next fight, which is going to be Marcelo Golm against Sergey Pavlovich. And again, guys, if you're listening on iTunes, I do apologise, but I am going to play some footage of Pavlovich in the background. Pavlovich is the guy in the blue shorts. Just to run in the background while I talk about this fight. Now, there were specific things that I wanted to call out and talk about when it came to what Tsarukyan brings to the table, but there's nothing really that I want to call out and talk about specifically when it comes to what Pavlovich does, just because he's kind of got a one-pace fighting style. He doesn't really go up a gear, doesn't really switch things up. His style is to stand in front of his opponent and try and basically win a kickboxing match. And the footage that you're seeing of him here, what you're seeing at the moment in this first minute of this first round against Mikhail Makhachev, is basically what you'll see in every minute of every round from Pavlovich. He's very one-pace, very consistent, doesn't really go up a gear, doesn't really increase his output, doesn't really change levels, mix things up, look for a takedown. This is basically what Pavlovich looks like. So as you can see though, he is a big, strong, powerful Russian, which means he's obviously again got home advantage on his side, which is huge in Russia. He's 27 years old, so that's very young for a heavyweight. You'd expect him to be making big improvements from fight to fight. But to be honest with you, again, Pavlovich is a guy that really doesn't blow my hair back. He's a very technical kickboxer, don't get me wrong. He's very fast for a heavyweight as well. But he's just not that high a volume of striker, which does bother me. He also doesn't really look that dangerous standing, and also he doesn't go up a gear. He's one of these guys that is just happy to stand in kickboxing range and chip away at you, try and outstrike you, but he doesn't really do that good of a job of putting his stamp on rounds, which is interesting because he's obviously a big favourite in this fight, which means that Marcelo Golm was one of the first names that jumped out at me. He's a big, strong, tough heavyweight, and as we know, anything can happen in heavyweight. Every single fighter at heavyweight carries legit one-shot KO power, so whenever I see one guy as a big favourite, one guy as a big underdog, that always piques my interest, because realistically, there's always value to find in a big underdog at heavyweight, because anything can happen. But the problem with Golm is, similar to Pavlovich, he doesn't really blow your hair back. He's, again, very one-paced, doesn't really go up a gear, struggles to put his stamp on rounds. And obviously, when you're fighting a Russian in Russia on the main card of a Russian event, that's not good, because as we know, home advantage is absolutely huge in Russia. You know, Russian judges are very biased. We know that, Russian referees will favour the Russian fighter, stand them up early if they're on bottom position, or give them more time to work from top position, or in the clinch, the crowd aren't going to get on the referee's back to separate a fighter if the Russian is in the dominant, more controlling position. Also, it's not easy to fly over to Russia, compete under a different time zone. The diet's different, the climate's different, the weather's different. Everything's different. It's a long flight from Florida, where Marcelo Golm currently lives, over to Russia. So Pavlovich does have an advantage. Home advantage is huge in MMA, and particularly in countries like Russia, where, if it's a close fight, 9 times out of 10, the judges are going to give it to their guy. But Golm is only 26 years old, just like Pavlovich. He's a very young heavyweight. So you would expect him to be making big improvements from fight to fight. He is currently training at American Top Team. Here we can see him, the picture with Junior Dos Santos. And there's lots and lots of pictures with Marcelo Golm training at American Top Team. So you would hope that he is making significant improvements from fight to fight. It's just that we haven't seen them yet, to be honest with you. He still has a style that struggles to put his stamp on rounds. Not particularly dangerous striking. Doesn't really ever go for takedowns, and a really frustrating thing about Golm is that he's just happy to battle it out in the clinch, grind on his opponents in the clinch, shows no urgency in that position, shows no urgency in the fight, and no desire to put his stamp on rounds, which, like I say, is a big concern when you're fighting a Russian in Russia, because if you don't increase your output, if you don't go up a gear, if you don't put your stamp on rounds, if rounds do end up being close, they're going to give it to their guy. But you can see, this fight, that's the first round from Pavlovich. You saw the majority of it. That girl certainly likes what she's seeing. But Pavlovich just very technical striker, decent kickboxer, not particularly dangerous, but just very consistent. Just chips away at his opponent, but doesn't really do that good of a job of putting his stamp on rounds. So if we look at this fight from a betting perspective, we currently have Marcelo Golm at odds of around about an average of 3.30, which is plus 230 for an implied probability of 30%. And to be honest with you, that is tempting. That is very tempting. But let's take a look at what the odds on Pavlovich are. So Pavlovich's odds are currently around about an average of, call it 1.36, which is minus 278 for an implied probability of 74%. So again, just like I said in the last fight, in order to bet Pavlovich, you have to give him around about an 80% chance of winning this fight, which at heavyweight is a stretch because every heavyweight carries legit one-shot KO power. He doesn't do that good of a job of putting his stamp on rounds. He is quite passive. Doesn't really show any urgency. Not the type of guy that I would bet on at these odds. And also in his last fight against Alistair Overeem, I know it was his UFC debut, so you'd expect better from him in his next fight. I know Alistair Overeem's absolutely legit, but Pavlovich did basically turtle up and quit in that fight. He was put in a bad position on the ground, didn't really try and fight out of it. He just basically turned over and waited for the referee to stop the fight, which isn't a good sign. It means that he may not have the mentality to compete at the highest level. Harsh but true. But if we look at Golm's odds, so if we bring it back up, 3.30, which is plus 230, I gotta be honest, this is another bet that I don't love. I really don't love it because it just doesn't have a style which is very crowd pleasing or judge pleasing. Doesn't put his stamp on rounds. Not particularly dangerous. I just don't see him having a big enough advantage in this fight to win 2 out of 3 rounds dominantly. And we know if the fight's anywhere near close and it goes to a decision, the judges are going to give Pavlovich a nod. It's just a reality. Judging is going to be biased towards Russian fighters on Saturday, or it's very likely that it will be. So if this fight was taking place anywhere else in the world, I would be tempted to bet Golm. I would be very, very tempted to bet Golm because if it did end up being a close fight, I do think it's going to be quite close. There's a chance that he could squeak out a split decision or, 2 out of the 3 judges could give him the nod. But in Russia, I just feel that's very unlikely. So it's not a bet I love. I think you're putting your money in a lot of danger if you bet Golm. Again, there's probably a little bit of value there, but I don't love it. There's just much better betting opportunities coming up over the next few weeks. And I'm going to be real with you guys. I need to buy a car. I want to buy a new car. The crypto market is set to explode any second now. We are at the early stages of a new crypto bull run. And the reality is, I don't feel like taking £500 or £1,000 of my money and putting it on a guy like Marcelo Golm, where that money, that good, solid, cold, hard cash, is going to be in a lot of danger, where I could just put that money towards buying a new car, or I could just go out and buy some Bitcoin or some other crypto project that I'm really interested in. That is a much safer bet at this moment in time because crypto markets are going to pop off very, very soon. It's just one of those things where I need the lever bet in order to place it. I don't want to give that other really long example that I used in yesterday's video about going shopping for clothes and finding a good deal. But Golm just isn't a very good deal. There might be a little bit of value there, but he really struggles to put his stamp on rounds. And in Russia, that's going to be a bit of a problem when you're fighting a Russian. So we now move on to the final fight that I want to talk about in today's video. We will be covering the very lovely Antonina Shevchenko against the equally lovely Roxanne Modafferi. And this fight gave me a massive headache. So 2 fights on this card have given me a giant headache. This is one of them. And I'll be covering another fight that gave me a huge headache in tomorrow's video. I didn't want to put both those fights in the same video. Otherwise, this would have turned out to just be a huge video. So I had to split them up. But this fight gave me a giant headache because I don't believe I don't believe Shevchenko has earned the right to be a big favourite yet over hardly anyone in the UFC women's flyweight division. I do believe this fight's at flyweight. Yes, it is. I don't believe she has earned the right to be a big favourite over anyone really, based on the skills that I've seen. She's completely untested on the ground. Her takedown defence is completely untested, and I feel that her current odds are around about 1.29, which is, for our American listeners, minus 345, 345. You know, I just don't believe that she's done enough to deserve those odds. I feel that her sister's popularity is having an impact on her odds, and I feel like she is artificially being hyped up based on what basically the profile of her sister. Now, we see this kind of thing happen all the time. We do get certain hype trains in the UFC. You know, Darren Till was one of them that got derailed very recently, but occasionally we get legit hype trains like Israel Adesanya that proved himself this past weekend. But I do feel Shevchenko, I would put her more towards the Darren Till box than the Adesanya box, because like I always say, it doesn't matter who you've won or lost against, doesn't matter who you fought. You should be able to determine how good someone is from the techniques that they display in the octagon. You know, Tsarukyan hasn't fought a particularly high level of opponent. We can see that his grappling's still very strong from the techniques that he uses. Shevchenko, whilst being a very decent striker, does have some issues in her overall skill set that Roxanne Modafferi can potentially exploit. And just to jump straight into it, it's quite obvious that Modafferi has no chance of winning this fight if it stays standing. For all of Shevchenko's weaknesses, she's still a very high-level kickboxer, very high-level Muay Thai practitioner. She's won Lion Fight titles. She's probably had hundreds of kickboxing or Muay Thai sparring sessions and fights over the years. And Roxanne Modafferi is a very low-level striker, poor striking defense, no power in her strikes at all, nothing offensively. She's very easy to hit. If Shevchenko keeps this fight standing, Modafferi will literally be a human punching bag for 15 minutes. This will not be a contest. Shevchenko could realistically win the fight 30-24 on the scorecards. The skill advantage is that big. She will absolutely dominate and decimate Modafferi when it comes to striking. There is no argument about that. However, Shevchenko has shown a few chinks in her armour over her last few fights, which does give Modafferi a chance. So the first mistake that Shevchenko makes is, quite frankly, she tries to take her opponents down. She tries to tie up with them in the clinch, which is a big mistake for a kickboxer against girls who are going to be a much higher level on the ground than her. Roxanne Modafferi is one of the best women's grapplers in the flyweight division. I believe Roxanne Modafferi has one of the heaviest top games in the UFC out of all weight classes. She's devastating from top position. She's got extremely heavy hips. She's got a very, very heavy top game, and she's able to inflict an enormous amount of ground and pound from top position. When Roxanne Modafferi gets top position on you, it's like she weighs 1,000 pounds. It's almost impossible to improve your position or get her off. She is a nightmare from top position, and that's a risk because Shevchenko, in pretty much all of her past fights, at some point has tried to tie her opponent up or take them down. And if she goes to the ground with Modafferi, she could be in a lot of trouble because Modafferi is a sly fox. She's not a particularly strong wrestler, doesn't really have particularly good offensive wrestling, but she is very good at reversing position and ending up on top from scrambles and weird positions that she creates for herself. So Shevchenko should treat the ground like lava in this fight and avoid it. Look to keep the fight in kickboxing range and just chip away at Modafferi from kickboxing range, where Modafferi will not have a chance of winning. But I'm not sure if Shevchenko's smart enough or disciplined enough to do that, because we've seen her sister make the same mistake over the years, over and over and over again, where even though she might have a big advantage when it comes to striking over her opponents, for whatever reason, she feels the need to tie them up or try to take them down, despite the fact that neither Valentina nor Antonina is particularly skilled on the ground. If you go back and watch Shevchenko's fight against Amanda Nunes for the UFC Women's Bantamweight title, it was actually a stupid head and arm throw takedown which cost Shevchenko the fight. Both girls were 2 rounds apiece going into the 5th round. Shevchenko was winning the 5th round, and instead of just keeping the fight in kickboxing range, chipping away at Amanda Nunes and winning the title, she chose to go for a high-risk, low-reward head and arm throw, ended up on the bottom, and Nunes stole the 5th round. It's just, they're not smart. These girls, they need to fight to their strengths and keep the fight in kickboxing range and keep it standing and use their strong hips and solid grappling in reverse to keep the fight standing. If Antonina Shevchenko starts getting into the clinch with Roxanne and she starts, trying to take her down or even thinking about getting into a grappling exchange with Roxanne, she could be in a lot of trouble. So that's a concern, because another thing that I've seen in Shevchenko's past fights is that she's gone for Paige Van Zandt style, high risk, low reward head and arm throws, just like we saw from Valentina in the Amanda Nunes fight, and just like we see from Valentina in many of her fights, where they go for the head and arm throw, they give their back up to their opponent in the hope that they can complete the throw and end up in side control. But it's very, very risky against a high-level judoka like Roxanne Modafferi that can use that technique to either reverse position and use their strong hips to end up on top, or end up taking you back if they've got strong enough hips to not allow you to complete the throw. So that's a big concern for me. Roxanne is got a really weird style. She's very bad at a lot of things, but exceptionally elite and incredible at other things, like top control, like her hips, like her ability to create scrambles in trips and throws in clinch positions. She's just tricky, very, very tricky. And a very high level, experienced grappler like Modafferi can cause a very inexperienced grappler like Shevchenko huge problems. She can punish a fighter like Shevchenko big time if they make slight mistakes. But make no mistake, this is definitely Shevchenko's fight to lose, because Roxanne Modafferi, I don't know what's up with her. I have a feeling that Father Time might be calling, because at 36 years old, it does look like she might be on a steep decline. Her last performance against Sahara Eubanks was very, very, very poor. If you go back and watch Roxanne's fight against Sahara Eubanks on The Ultimate Fighter, it was a very competitive matchup. There were moments which were separated by an inch on who was going to take a dominant position in that fight, and Eubanks just came out on top in a couple of those positions to win the fight. But if things would have gone slightly different, Roxanne could have won this fight, no doubt about it. Whereas when they fought back in November, Roxanne got dominated. She looked very, very poor against Sahara Eubanks, and that could be a sign that Father Time's starting to catch up with her. She's had close to 40 pro fights. She's fought all over the world. She's been around for a long time. She's 36 years old, so she's getting up there in age now. And it wouldn't surprise me if she started to significantly decline after all the wars, all the years of training. Also, we have to remember the fact that when she fights, she wears like heavy padding or braces on both knees, which suggests that she may have bad knees or weaknesses in her knees or chronic injuries that may limit her mobility, maybe limit her ability to shoot in deep on her opponents and take them down. And that's one of the issues that I have about Modafferi, is that even though she's extremely heavy from top position and she's great in the scramble and she's a high level grappler, her offensive wrestling is very, very poor. She doesn't really have the athleticism to shoot in on her opponents and take them down. And I don't know why, but Modafferi also doesn't really seem to shoot that many takedowns anymore. A few years back when she was picking up some big wins in Invicta, and when she was on the season 26 of The Ultimate Fighter, she was showing nice, deep offensive wrestling, single and double leg takedowns, which were, really making her look like a top 5 fighter in the flyweight division. But for whatever reason, over the last few fights against Montano, Honchak and Eubanks, hasn't really shot that many takedowns at all. Only 1 or 2 per fight, which, is just not enough. because Modafferi just simply doesn't have the skills to keep a fight competitive if it stays standing. So she needs to get fights to the ground. So the fact that she doesn't shoot that many takedowns, it is a massive concern. And it is a concern when it comes to betting this fight, because if Shevchenko fights smart, uses her grappling in reverse to keep the fight standing, she's going to absolutely annihilate Modafferi. So if we look at this fight from a betting perspective, Shevchenko has an implied probability of around about 78% at odds of 1.29, which is minus 345. There's no way that I can bet Shevchenko here. I think Shevchenko is a very, very bad bet, because obviously she makes mistakes which puts herself at risk of finding herself in very bad positions on the ground. But the big decision I had to make on this fight was whether Roxanne was worth a bet. Because to be honest with you, Roxanne, when I saw that Roxanne was a big underdog, she was the first name that jumped out at me. So odds of 3.85, which is plus 285 for an implied probability of 26%. It's a tough decision, guys. It really is a tough decision, because this is one of those fights where if Shevchenko fights smart and she shows up and performs to her full potential and she avoids the ground like lava, Roxanne's screwed, to be honest with you, because she doesn't really have the offensive wrestling to take Shevchenko down with single leg and double leg takedowns. In order for this fight to go to the ground, she's going to have to rely on Shevchenko making a mistake. For example, like attempting a Paige Van Zandt style head and arm throw, like tying her up in a clinch, or like trying to take her down. And then she would be able to reverse position and end up on top. And I really find it tricky to put my money in those positions, because I hate placing a bet where you have to rely on the gut. I hate betting on a fighter knowing that the only way they can win is if their opponent makes a mistake or does something dumb. I hate that. When I bet on a fighter, I like them to be able to win on merit based on the things that they can do. I don't like putting my money in these positions, but Roxanne's very tempting. She is very, very tempting. I don't think she's a bad bet. If you're looking for action on this card, Roxanne's one of the better bets on the card in terms of the value you're getting. For me, I've just said, I care about money at the moment. I want to buy a car. The crypto market's about to pop off. I need to love every bet that I place. There are fights coming up over the next few weeks with amazing betting opportunities, and I don't want to take potential profits from those bets and put them in harm's way on bets like this that I just don't love. That's how I'm feeling. Depends on what your risk tolerance is. So, if Roxanne was the type of fighter that would shoot one or two really deep takedown attempts per round, I would feel comfortable betting on her, because even if I didn't necessarily think that she would get them, at least she's initiating the action enough where Shevchenko may make a mistake when defending a takedown, or may go for a trip or throw a reversal in the clinch, which would open the door for Roxanne Modafferi to take top position. If Modafferi was that active in going for one or two takedowns per round, I would bet her at these odds, absolutely no doubt about it. The reason why I'm personally passing is because I hate the fact that Modafferi only commits to one or two takedowns per fight. Because think about it, guys. Even if Modafferi does really commit to one takedown in this fight and she gets it, if she doesn't get a finish and Shevchenko wins the other two rounds, Modafferi's still probably going to lose a decision. Modafferi would have to really commit hard to two takedown attempts in this fight in two different rounds and get both takedowns in order to win. And based on her past performances, her recent ones against Montano, Honchak and Eubanks, I don't trust her to do that. And I feel like at 36 years old, after having close to 40 pro fights, Father Time might be starting to catch up with her. Because 2-3 years ago, Modafferi aggressively pursued the takedown, aggressively tried to get fights to the ground, but I haven't seen that in her last 3 fights, and that is a bit of a concern for me, to be honest with you. There were entire rounds against Eubanks and Montano where she didn't shoot a single takedown, when it was clear she was second best standing against both those girls, and it was clear that her only path to victory was to take them down. So that is why I'm personally passing, but based on everything that you've said, you make your own decision. I don't think Modafferi is a terrible bet. I just think it's putting your money in a lot of danger. So that is it for today's video, guys. I will be back tomorrow with part 3, where I break down another 3 fights from a betting perspective. And remember, if you want the live stream this Saturday, where I break down, or I try and find a prop bet for every single fight on this card, and I also answer all your questions in the live chat, please hit the thumbs up button below. We need to get 150 likes on every video that I put out this week. And also, don't forget to check out The Moneycast, which is my new podcast, on iTunes. Please subscribe and leave a review for that. And take care, guys. Have a great night. I will see you tomorrow.
Too many thoughts on my mind, I can't sleep at night, so I just keep writing. I don't need no help, I don't need opinions, so don't waste my time then. I just been living online, my city don't show me no love, and that's fine. Fuck local radio stations, I got more plays than all of these rappers combined. I'm going again, I've been going in, I'm fed up with so many things, I gotta just let it all out. I'm talking about the shit they've been talking about.